Welcome to the AI+HI Project, a SHRM podcast. I'm your host, Nichol Bradford, SHRM's Executive in Residence for AI+HI. This week we're discussing leveraging AI to transform your people 100%. In this episode, we'll delve into the transformative potential of AI to enhance human performance and how AI can foster personalized learning, boost engagement, streamline training administration, and uncover insightful analytics. You'll be able to future-proof your talent strategies and gain insights from real-life examples of AI in action. Joining us today, we have Karie Willyerd to talk about this subject in depth. Karie is the Chief Customer Strategy Officer for GP Strategies and is a fractional CLO in residence for Skillable and Uplimit. A 6-time Chief Learning and Talent Officer, she was most recently the SVP and CLO for Visa. She is the only CLO to have taken 2 companies to number 1 in the world as recognized by ADT. Welcome to the AI+HI Project, Karie.
Oh, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So as a former CLO, and a multiple CLO, you've witnessed the evolution of learning firsthand. What sets the AI revolution in learning and development apart from previous technological shifts that you've seen?
Yeah. I think this is really interesting. And one of the things that we have to be careful about is that we don't underestimate how big this could be. I'm have practiced in the field long enough to remember the internet coming in and to remember cloud computing coming in and thinking those were all going to be big things, and they are, and have been. This, I think, is almost a revolution as big as the industrial era, if it plays out in the ways that people think it's going to play out. And and I think it's going to take us a lot more time and energy to react to and adapt to all the changes that are in front of us. I'm excited to talk about those over the course of this podcast.
What makes this more of a revolution? What are some of the specific things that are indicators to you that this is a revolution as opposed to just another technological shift?
So I think some of the things that are really interesting. I took a course at MIT on strategy and AI this last spring, and we thought the way artificial intelligence was going to develop was that it would be something that would take care of the routine, the repeatable, the low level skill sets for humans. And that's what we've thought for 50, 60, 70 years. We imagined a future where robots and replacement of factory work would be the first thing that happened, or low level administrative work. And it turns out that where we're at now, with just the generations that we have available to us now of these large language models, are able to do much more sophisticated things. For example, in tests that were done with artificial intelligence against a general practitioner, AI won in 28 out of 32 variables for both excellence in diagnostics, accuracy in diagnostics, and empathy. And on the other four, it tied. So there are so many things in which brainstorming new ideas for startups. AI won hands down against in juries of venture capitalists looking at ideas for being faster, cheaper, easier to implement, more creative. So there are so many ways in which we were unprepared for how AI is playing out and what it can do, leaving open the questions for us to explore. So then, what does it mean to be human, and what will humans be doing? And how do we get people ready and able to work well with our new AI colleague?
One of the things that I've heard you talk about is the importance of data quality in AI effectiveness. And our audience likes to hear very specific strategies. What are some of the strategies that they can employ that you would recommend for HR leaders to assess and improve their learning data infrastructure before implementing AI?
Yeah, there's a paradox first off that I should mention, which is that these large language models are hungry for data. That's how they learn. And so, given any kind of data at all, messy data is better than a little bit of organized data. So there's that paradox for how large language learns. When you get, since our audience is largely going to be inside an enterprise of some sort using some sort of, and they're not training an LLM themselves, they're maybe fine tuning an LLM. That
Mhm.
fine tuning is aided by knowing what are the proper sources to go to. And unfortunately, many of our sources sit on people's laptops still or in their folders inside a cloud application, but not necessarily organized in a way for people to get to. So, thus, the overwhelming popularity lately of data lakes for people to start storing their data in. So, I think one of the first things to do is figure out where your data is. And a lot of us don't know where it is. Less important to try and get it all in one place because I think we're going to be able to feed it into a common and shared reservoir known as a data lake for the LLMs to access. But that's a very helpful first start is just saying, well, we have data. Where is it? And what do we want it to get access to?
Yeah, I was looking at a statistic the other day that as much information that's on the internet, the amount of private data, as you said, that's on intranets and hard drives endorse that, 100 times. For our audience, would you mind defining what a data lake is? We have a wide variety of people in our audience who are on different stages of their journey.
Yes, and I will caveat that by saying I'm not a technologist. I just study technology to try and bring it to to the audience that I work with, which is mostly learning and talent in HR. So some of the big providers in here are Databricks and Snowflake, and what they've made possible is in our audience, many people would be familiar with, for example, Workday and Success Factors and Cornerstone and so on. So we have data sitting in many systems. Then we also have data if we want to understand, for example, begin to do some really interesting analytics in HR. It would be helpful to get data from performance metrics that might sit inside factory systems or might sit inside of our financial systems. Data lakes are repositories for all that data to essentially route through and be able to grab it from there. So that there's this one big place where all the data in an enterprise can be accessed.
That's great. And it's a really great visual. So I love that. So everyone, data lake, it's a reservoir to put all of your data in. And so now that we've talked a little bit about data and we've talked a little bit about technology, I'd love to switch over to the human side and hear from you what you feel the core elements of a successful AI enabled strategy are that remains human centered. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think this is a really great question that a lot of people are wrestling with. And it can be answered at multiple levels. So at the systems level, one of the things that we need to look at as we're designing our AI systems is where do we keep humans in the loop as safeguard measures? So, as these AI systems are training, it would not be unusual to think about a lot of supervision of an AI system at the beginning until we know that it works well. There might be some AI systems that help us that we will always want to keep some sort of human in the loop, if that might be payroll data, for example, or payroll communications. There might always be a human in the loop. So there's at the system level, there are humans that work alongside and will work alongside AIs as humans in that loop. But then you ask the question, well, what about humans and their jobs? And there's a researcher who has said AI is unlikely to replace humans, but humans with AI skills are likely to replace humans without AI skills. And so maybe the second level is what AI skills will I need to be able to be one of those people that can thrive into the future? And it's changing. This is the first time in my career as a scholar practitioner where if I see something that's more than 3 months old, I'm a little bit skeptical of it because everything is so new and you feel out of date. You show up at a conference on Monday and somebody's released a new version of a groundbreaking LLM on Friday. So uh, doing things that you didn't know could be done. So so staying on top of it. One of the things a person I follow who I think is a nice translator of technology in a practical business sense is Ethan Mollick out of
Yes.
Wharton. He's got a good Substack to help people kind of stay on top of things. And then I think there are, in my view, there are going to be jobs that are going to be eliminated. And I think there's going to be some really interesting repercussions. I heard Ethan Mollick on a podcast recently say, we've relied on apprenticeship programs essentially in industry for getting people up to speed on how to work. I can graduate them from Wharton with some basic understanding of how to be a program manager. But if they come into if they go to work at Apple or they go to work at Microsoft or they go to work at Schneider Electric, they need to learn those skills by being on a team and working with them. Now, if AI is going to be able to do some of those first level skills for us, how do we bridge the gap between where colleges are graduating people and where the new entry level jobs might be? So I
Right.
think there's a really interesting question about how do we get humans in their early stage of career ready for that world as well. So where's the human in that equation? And then there's this other question, which is what skills are uniquely human now? And because we thought it was creativity, for example. And I think the LLMs are exhibiting such levels of creativity that it would be inaccurate to say that. So I think systems thinking is still very much a human skill. I think curiosity and therefore the ability to ask the right questions and to explore in the LLMs is still a uniquely human skill. So I think I answered that across four different levels there, Nicole. So,
Well, I mean, one of the things that we're going to have to get done is, I think, definitely the workflows and the task identification and the skill identification so that we can see which things are actually really suitable for AI. Like I was just taking a look at the back end of LinkedIn's most recent on Monday release of their AI recruiter and how 80% of the tasks that recruiters do, much of which is monotonous, can now be done by the LinkedIn recruiter and laying the tasks out. So I think it's about, in order to keep humans in the center, we not only have to figure out what are uniquely human skills, but also what is it that we want to do? Because
yeah.
like what do we actually want to do? What do we really enjoy doing? What things that when we do them deliver the highest amount of value to the enterprise, to the organization. So to go down deeper into skill identification, with AI advancing skill identification, also development, how do you think that this is going to reshape our traditional competency frameworks and career pathing. Like, how will AI help us figure this out?
Yeah. So, there, and this is also a two-sided question. So I think this is going to be very interesting because competencies and skill matrices, and I'm going to be a little controversial here, Nicole, but
Yay.
when I've been in with groups of small groups of CLOs and said, okay, does anybody here really think they have figured out their whole skills taxonomy and the skill marketplace, a true skill-based marketplace, and you're rocking and rolling, you've got this figured out, and there's not a single person that's ever raised their hand to that question. So I think it's still a very difficult uh, piece of work in front of us, to be very honest. I think there are many great systems out there that are tackling this, but putting it all together, we just quite haven't gotten yet. So I think AI is actually going to help us be able to use AI in these systems, because some of these new systems are able to do things like look at how you're working and derive your skills rather than you telling me what skills you have, or filling out some form that tells me what your skills, or have your manager validate. We can actually look at your work product and be able to tell what kind of skills you have. And so will that, I know of a company that's also looking at comparing what do your competitors do, and how can we tell based on their performance in the marketplace and how they write about themselves and how analysts write about them, what their core capabilities are as an organization. So I think it's going to be many really interesting ways in which AI is going to help us be able to get there. And then this kind of the flip side of that is, so for example, one of the companies I work with is GP Strategies, and we have a really interesting product that can go look at your existing content and derive what skills it addresses. So you don't have to do that as humans and take every course now and try and figure out what skills does this cover. It just scans it and can do it and then maps to the skills in the job. So it's kind of a two-way solution to try and find out what are the skills, and then what do we have that can help address those skills, that I think is still in front of us.
So that's really exciting to me. And the reason why is when I think about what I want from AI in organizations, I'm excited by the idea of someone in another division, another department being considered potentially for a role across the organization. So I'm really excited about internal talent mobility for people who might be missed, who might be overlooked simply because their hiring manager doesn't know the other hiring manager, or their boss or their supervisor doesn't at that moment know that in their heart they want to try something else. So I'm excited about it for that. I'm excited about it for being able to, as you said earlier, like, how do we map the journey for young people coming into organizations? A lot of what happens in those early years is a supervisor observing the work that you're doing and helping you figure out what to focus on. So I
Mhm.
think that's really exciting to have more solid and consistent pathways for young people. And then also, just in general, skills based hiring in general, the way that that can support economically being able to fill more roles that are empty today by having a broader definition of how we understand who might be suitable. So I'm excited about it, and I love the examples you gave. And one of the things that I'd love to hear about is how AI affects cohort management and learner support. So you're in there, you're in the learning and development. How can AI make it better or easier to manage cohorts, to have learner support, and how is it transforming these areas in L&D?
Yeah. So one of the companies that I am the CLO in residence is Uplimit, and that's exactly the problem we're tackling there. Is not only making cohort management more efficient, but more effective by giving nudges to people, by understanding where they're at. So, without the intervention of a human, so being able to see you got so far through in the learning, are you, a nudge to remind them to get back in, and and kind of diagnosing where people are falling off to be able to enable much higher completion rates and so on. Or, the other thing that I think companies are looking at is um, it, there are similarities in skills. So, for example, long ago, uh, there was a company called EDS, and they were training systems architects when there weren't very many system architects in the world. And they found that people with music skills made good system architects. So it's not that they had the skills of a systems architect, but they had a skill that was similar enough. And we could tell it was similar enough that the bridge to systems architecture was not so great. So I think AI is going to help us figure that out too. If you're good at this, you might also be good at this other thing. And so then we need, I think the kind of wonderful thing is there's this opportunity for learning and development in HR to be one of the most central pieces of an organization, because we're going to help solve upskilling people to the new world of AI, and also this bridge that I talked about between having to jump a level, not necessarily getting the on the job practice that you might have gotten from before. And, that can include learning with your peers in AI enabled systems like Uplement. It could mean things like being able to test yourself frequently. And so having standards that companies like Skillable are doing, where you can test yourself to see, well, what do I know or don't know? And I think that's going to become more important in these skills based systems. So they're far more than just, do I have an HRIS? Do I have an LMS? Do I have a learning? Do I have a talent marketplace? It's so many pieces that go together to put this in place, which is why it's a big sticky problem that people are still trying to pull together the answer on. But I'm with you on the potential for what it can mean for the democratization of access to roles.
Yeah. So, what is your most promising? So, we've talked about a couple of things that we're both excited about, but I'd love to hear what AI use cases in learning do you find the most promising for HR?
Yeah, I'm very excited about the there there is a lot of learning time and effort spent on routine uh, updates. A compliance training where a law changes, and so you have to update the training. That will be very easy for AI to just handle. Probably can do now. Or you get an update in some systems training for your ERP that you're working on. And I think that's going to free up learning and development in HR to start to think about the higher order skills. And it's going to free up money and time for the higher order skills. Ernst and Young, or EY, does this triangle of where they think AI is going to be helpful. So productivity is one, and that's one of the first areas that a lot of us are looking at is productivity. But the second area is quality. So we'll be able to improve the quality of all of our interactions with our employees, with the way we can personalize our products to whoever we serve. And then the third area that they have identified is engagement. So how much more will we be able to engage with people?
Looking ahead 3 to 5 years, how do you see AI changing the balance between standardized learning and personalized development? And one of the reasons why I ask that is, I think in schools, for example, I think the essay is dead. I think that many things that don't happen live will be reduced in how we use them to evaluate people. So I think there's going to be more experiential. I think there's going to be more people being in simulations and making decisions, somewhat
Mhm.
like games. And so I'm curious, in sort of like standardized systems or standardized learning, and then on the other side, very personalized development, and then the new possibilities of experiential learning.
Mhm.
How do you
Mhm.
see that shaping and shifting over the next 3 to 5 years?
Um, we must be as sisters from another era because as you're talking, your questions are the same ones I would have thought of. I read this, so I'll start with maybe an example of where I think things could go. There was an article in MIT's quarterly review, technology review, on where's gaming going. And so in the games, there are these characters called non-player characters. And these
Mhm.
non-player characters have a bit of a script. If you've ever gamed at all, you might have seen them. You come across them in the game, and they might just be throwing an axe or whatever.
Yeah, I have a quick data point for you. Before I came to SHRM many years ago, I operated World of Warcraft China.
Oh,
So yeah,
you did! Wow.
so absolutely, so games are perfect for this. But I know our audience doesn't know what a NPC is, so I love that you gave
Yeah,
that definition. But I just wanted to give you some context.
yeah, cool. So now imagine that these NPCs, these non-player characters, because you're the player, the person that's coming in. So these non-player characters are GPTs, little mini GPTs, all with their own identity that's been connected to them. That's going to be a much richer game. Now, when I read that, I thought, oh my gosh, think about, for example, leadership training or interpersonal skills training, where the classic, I've been a trainer in my career. Let's put three people in a group and you play that you're the supervisor and you play you're the disgruntled employee who wants extra time off and you're the observer. Well, now we're going to have very sophisticated GPTs that can not only act out a role, they can observe you. So for part of our audience who might not have seen what LLMs can do now, one of the recent demos was someone coming on and saying, "Hey, how do I look? I've got an interview tomorrow." And the LLM says, "Well, if you're looking for the I've stayed all up all night programming look, you've got that, but you might want to run your fingers through your hair." So this wasn't, pre-written or anything. They can dynamically offer feedback on so I thought, how amazing is that going to be for having much more realistic ability to do some of these tougher skills to get at, because you know how it is. You don't want to be the disgruntled employee. You don't want to give as hard feedback if you're the manager to someone. But in a game like situation, how interesting is going to, and that's just an example of one little way in which and that might be based then in a cohort program that's looking to see, did you remember to do this thing over here? And how did you feel about your own performance in that, and connect you to other colleagues who are doing it at the same time? So I think the possibilities are way beyond what we're thinking of now, and it's exciting to see some of these young companies really doing interesting things to get us there.
Yes, one of the things that we saw in games is that people play very close to their they play very close to their personality. So there was this one company that I was looking at several years ago where they would do team dynamics and they would put the team in the space station and the space station is falling apart. And the first time they would run through it, they wouldn't get any information. They just had to figure it out. Then the second time they would run through it, they each would have an HR coach with them or a trainer
Mhm, mhm,
talking to them about how their dynamics are, and then they would iterate, and so the team could just do it over and over again. But some of the things that they saw is that the information hoarder they do it in game. You know,
Oh, that's
person who
interesting. Yeah.
doesn't talk to anyone else and, and runs through the door without checking with their team, like, they do the
Yeah.
same thing in game. And
Yeah.
so over time, people were able to really see, oh, this is how I behave. So I think we're gonna see things like that. Games are becoming fundamentally easier and less expensive to build, so I think you'll really see this intersection. So, as we're coming to a close, one question: as AI is taking on more tasks, and assume that I'm an L&D leader, how should I think about reallocating my team's time and resources? I can't do everything. I have to make choices. With AI coming in, how should I be thinking about how I manage my team's time and resources with AI?
I think the very first thing to think about is our own skills in even being able to understand it. And Ethan Malik, who I referred to earlier out of Wharton, says one thing you should do is just get into an LLM and spend at least 10 hours. That's just a very practical thing. Spend 10 hours messing around in ChatGPT or Anthropic or wherever, Claude, if you're whichever one you want, to just get a feel for what it can do. So do that and encourage your staff to do that. Then I think the eh, the the people that are making money right now are the consultants. Those are the ones that are making money and getting really big results. But I think what we can do is start to identify use cases. Where would it make sense for us to begin to, whether it's the administrative tasks that take up time and energy, whether it's developing, is there good enough content development capabilities in some of these tools already to streamline our work in order to invest? So look for the low hanging fruit, just like we would have done with many other programs, and then try and stay on top of it, because it is one of these, even if it's just putting together a little learning group inside your own organization, find people with some natural interests and just make it a topic that of at least a monthly staff topic on what's developed over the last month.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, and we like to close out with, what is your dream use case? What is the thing that you want to see happening with personalization and top line?
I want to really, I think what's going to happen, we're working online so often that these systems can see how we work and can see what we've read, see what we've heard, hear what we've said in meetings. And I think it's going to become such that they'll be able to suggest, the systems will be able to suggest learning areas that we need to work on based on our own goals and who we want to become. So I think moving towards getting friendly feedback from your digital twin is not too far away.
Thank you for that great imaginative answer. I really hope for the same thing too. And so that's going to do it for this week's episode. A big thank you to Karie Willyerd for sharing your experience and deep insights with us. Before we say goodbye, I encourage you to follow the AI+HI project wherever you enjoy your podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to comment, leave a review. It makes a big difference. Finally, you can find all of our episodes on our website at shrm.org/AIHI. Thanks for joining the conversation, and we'll catch you next time.